Hey there, welcome to Someone's Gotta Make It. On this show, we're talking to the founders and leaders behind businesses that make ordinary, everyday products you encounter all the time in your daily life, but you never really think about how they're made. And in talking to some of these folks, I learned that the challenges they encountered in growing their businesses from scratch are the same challenges that we all encounter. And they found practical ways of overcoming those challenges. So if you're building a business right now, you're gonna wanna listen up. I'm your host, Ben Goldstein. I'm the VP of Marketing at Nutshell. Nutshell is a CRM and email marketing platform. We help thousands of businesses all around the world get organized and automate the little stuff in their day so they can focus on what's important. And what's important is building stronger relationships with your buyers. In this episode, we're talking about turf. You know, the turf you see at athletic fields or outside schools. Where does this stuff come from? How is it made? And how does a person decide to devote their entire life to making it? Well, I have a guest today that could speak to all that. His name is Joe Motz. Joe is the CEO of the Motz Group, which specializes in the installation of high-performance natural and synthetic athletic field systems. He started his business out of a pickup truck and grew it into an industry leader. He's done fields for the Cincinnati Bengals, the Baltimore Ravens, the Atlanta Braves. He's done the Churchill Downs racetrack. But it wasn't always easy for Joe. He had to learn about managing people for the first time. He had to learn how to hire the right talent at the right time. How do you get good at that stuff? So he's gathered these lessons that he's learned over 4.5 decades of running this business. He's going to share them all with us today. Here's my conversation with Joe Motz. Enjoy the show. No kid says to themselves, I want to start a turf company when I grow up. Tell me about the moment that inspired you to start this company.
I think I started out of necessity. I grew up on a sod farm, so the idea of turf was kind of in my blood. It's what I did. And I think it was the push I got from my dad. I was the oldest of 8. We had 8 in our family. My dad's brother Albert had 8. And so Edmund and Albert ran the Motz turf farms, me being the oldest, so there's 16 on the home place. So junior in high school, Dad's like, I don't know that he's showing a lot of direction on what he wants to do. I'm thinking it's what he's thinking because he sat me down with a pretty strong come to Jesus conversation where it was like, ooh, what do you think you're going to do when you grow up? And I was like, well, I'm going to run the farm. And he said, well, you got way too many little Indians behind you, Joe, so you're going to have to look for something. I was always very entrepreneurial. We did projects outside of the overall operations on our vegetable and turf farm where we were each able to sell things ourselves, and I really enjoyed that. When I left for college, I was very much focused on doing it my way. The honest short answer is I probably felt I couldn't work for anybody else. Nobody would employ me.
Was there anything about sports fields in particular that drew your interest?
Sports fields weren't yet in the mindset when I started out. It was doing work in the grounds care space. It was managing those.
How long did it take before you transitioned to that piece of the market and started building athletic fields?
Some was by luck, but luck is what you make of it. I started very humbly, started in the residential side, actually doing lawn mowing, and then pretty quickly realized I can't grow this model because everybody wants their place looking great for the weekend. No one wants you there the front part of the week. So I moved the grounds care focus over into the commercial space. So started maintaining office parks or small retail strips, ultimately led to bigger office park opportunities. And that's when crossed paths with the ownership of the Cincinnati Bengals. They loved the way we had their site looking, loved the turf, the floral displays, the bedwork, and asked if we could not help them on their sports field.
Wow, so that was the first big customer for the athletic field side of the business was the Cincinnati Bengals?
It was pretty humble, though. It was on their practice facility. It was pretty rough. I had some just pasture grass I would maintain that looked as good as their practice field did back in that day. There was a 3-foot elevation difference from one side of the field to the other. So it's not quite what you think in today's NFL standards.
So what's the biggest difference between a sports field and just the grass in somebody's backyard?
It's the budget. It's the amount of input technology that goes into it. Most of the action happens under the surface on a sports field. So it's all about what you're doing engineering-wise, water movement-wise, air movement-wise, soil.
Well, give me an example of that. What air movement-wise, what does that mean for a stretch of turf?
For plant material to live, we all think of water when we think of soil, but we forget about air. Plants can't live in an anaerobic state, so you have to create the ideal mix, and in our more sophisticated systems, we actually manage the air space underneath by pumping air into it or pulling air out of it, which both allows the water to be removed, but it also aerates the root zone.
As briefly as you can answer this, where does synthetic turf come from? What is that stuff anyway?
Yeah, the synthetic turf of today is very different from back in the day when we used to view it as the enemy because it was honestly like a Brillo pad. It would take your skin right off. But synthetic turf of today very much replicates the blade width, size, and it acts similar to natural turf. But it's polyethylene is the product. It's extruded out into a very thin sheet, almost like visqueen, and then that sheet is slit into widths to match the width of the grass blade, and it's tufted into a backing similar to what like an old shag rug would be. In this case, it's pretty awesome technology. Basically, you're putting long pile carpet outside. And then you're infilling that with all kind of secret ingredients, infills that make the blades stand up and become the quote-unquote soil in the mix.
And so what about natural turf and the differences there? I mean, you mentioned that you got your start with the family business of a sod farm. So how do you grow that stuff? Where do you grow it now?
Yeah, the sod side of the business is one that requires very high-quality topsoil in order to grow it. And that's the problem with most lawns is people try to replicate the same thing. It's really hard to do in our typical urban areas. Going all the way back to the start, sod is grown many times in river bottoms because that's where you've got rich topsoil. And you're taking a bit of the farm off every year when you harvest.
They say that the company you start with is never the company you end up with. What was the original vision for the Motz Group, and how was that vision different from what the company is today?
Vastly different in that when we originally started, my focus was on answering the client's pain point in our localized region. And so it was like, hey, what can we do to improve your landscape, to create more curb appeal? And so we're answering how to best bring clients or customers into their site versus the one down the road. So it was always about our primarily lead focus was on trying to attract a better image via the work that we did for them. And the vision was really very much local. It was to be that group that's called upon in the local community for improving grounds.
Now, you mentioned before that you were hired early on to do the practice field for the Cincinnati Bengals. Was that the moment where you felt like the business was working, or was there some other point where you felt like, okay, we're cooking with gas now?
The first time I felt like things were clicking is when I didn't have to worry so much about payroll every week, honestly.
It's a big moment.
But yeah, to your point as to when do you feel like you've made it, there's so many versions of that. It was when I'd get the next office park. It'd be when I'd get the next site. And then with realizing I was always seeking those sites that had a higher interest in turf care because that was kind of the sweet spot. Prior to the Bengals, we were maintaining high school fields, not doing their mowing, but doing all the technical aspects, the renovation, the field drainage, and that kind of work. And that's when I realized that, boy, this is a cool area of specialty that not a lot of other players are in, where there were an awful lot of landscape maintenance firms at the time. And so I started moving more and focusing on a larger and larger repertoire of high school clients within the portfolio of grounds care customers.
And as that began to happen and you started getting more high school clients, what was the first major problem that you ran into as that expansion started to happen? What was the first major growing pain of success for you?
Time and again, the first major challenge is people. As you expand from what started as one guy in a pickup truck and a shovel, literally, to needing multiple team members and not being on the specific project that they're working with the customer on, then it just causes you to manage in a very different way versus just osmosis, watch what I do and repeat the same. It's hard to do as you start to scale it. I struggled with that for many years, was how to best maintain the kind of quality. I'm a perfectionist at heart, which is a double-sided sword. It can drive you, but it also can take you down.
I want to dig in deeper on that point of solving this problem of people and getting the right people around you. You mentioned when you first started the business back in 1977, it was just you and a pickup truck and a shovel. Tell me about the first time you had to hire someone and what was the role you needed to fill and how'd you go about it?
Initially, it wasn't so dramatic. I hired a relative, and I knew that person had the same last name. And so there was just a sense of affinity there. It kind of worked at that level, and we're in the same pickup truck together, so the person's able to learn from the get-go as to what I'm doing. When you start moving from more people that can fit in the truck to needing broader teams of the same kind of delivery, that's when it really started challenging and causing me to spend more and more hours in the day with either coming back around to the client and trying to make whatever wasn't adequately done in their expectation correct, and or coaching my team members.
Yeah. I think you're mostly talking about finding laborers and installers and training them up right. What about the first time you brought on someone for sales or marketing or operations? And when did those hires become a necessity?
For ever so many years, I had a company that I would say was very top-down, command and control. So I hired people that had functional skills in the stuff we did. So in the grounds care, in the technical aspects of turf, it took me many years to realize that I've got to hire people outside of that realm in order to truly grow it. Trying to then move into how to have another person handle the marketing was hard for me, honestly. It's an area that I felt like, boy, that is key to setting the expectation, listening to the client. But in the end, I did it the same way that the functional aspects were taught, was just working side by side with a person that was somewhat extroverted and able to speak with clients.
How did you know you were hiring the right people? Were you working on gut feeling? Did you trust their experience? Did you rely on the input of people you trusted?
Initially, I was hiring people I knew, and then people that knew them. As you need more and more people, it's largely people that looked like me, were similar age to me. I've always just had natural DNA to push, and so it was always people that were, I got this, I'm a doer, I'll blow through walls together with you. We had that kind of momentum and that kind of force in place from the start. And it was a real, like, congenial, almost team-like environment. And it continues to be, but at that time it was much more about the functional things you knew how to do and not enough attention on the person and what makes them tick.
It also sounds like you were hiring more for an attitude than experience. Is that true? And is that still the case?
Yeah, I would say in the early days, it was both experience and attitude. Attitude played the big part, though, that they had to have considerable amount of drive. And then as time went, became much more aware of having a sense of whether this person is a team player or a me player was a powerful piece to us, being able to move beyond individual success and individual leadership to collective force as a high-performing team. But it took many years to get there.
Tell me about maybe the progression that's happened over those years. Has what you look for in potential hires changed in any way as you've gotten more experience? For example, are there things you used to think were important and now don't, or vice versa?
For many years, it was all about, tell me about what you know about this industry space and where have you had experience? How can we work together with you in that role? We moved as time went to tell me a bit about yourself. What do you enjoy doing? What are you really passionate about? What gets you up every day? Better understanding the person became more and more meaningful. Mm-hmm. In the end, I think to sum it up, it's having a sense of, is the chemistry right? Do we have a sense of trust right away, or powerful pieces?
Did you ever make a mistake and hire the wrong person?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even in the best scenario, you win about 60% of the time. We're good at putting on images, and we're good at showing up like we're expected to show up at an interview. So we've just become far more intentional about slow to hire process, and one that looks at the whole person in a lot larger way than we ever did before.
What did you learn from that first experience of feeling like you got it wrong in terms of hiring a team member?
Yeah, generally it's a school of hard knocks, an issue with the client, an issue with integrity, credibility, lack of performance. All of those things happen when you rush to hire. The reality is that you can't always be there to manage those things and ensure that they're happening. You're being represented through others. It starts out as 10, then 20, and grows, and we're well over 100. So it becomes ever so important that truly in people's hearts, they've got the same kind of desire that you have as leadership.
What's the number one deal breaker for you? Like in your experience, what's the top sign that you need to part ways with one of your employees?
What we now are able to do is very specifically hire intentionally around our values. And when one of those values are broken, it's time to coach them out. Mm-hmm. It's a tough conversation because sometimes it's a person that you might personally have an affinity to, but it's a very necessary conversation for the good of the enterprise.
Just like you can't always get it right in hiring someone, you can't always get it right in firing someone. Have you ever felt like you've made a mistake in letting someone go and sort of regretted it later?
I think I've always second-guessed. It's because I care about the team. It's one of the most difficult aspects of managing people. I don't feel like one should ever lose the butterflies in the stomach when you have to go through that process, because it's dramatic for both sides. It's a very difficult thing to do. I'm sure if you ask some of the recipients over the years, they would say that, I didn't deserve to be let go. I do feel and have a relationship with many because I feel we did it in a way that was humane. It's tough on both sides.
Starting the Motz Group was your first time managing a group of people. What was the first management lesson you learned the hard way?
Yeah, the first management lesson, I can think of ever so many. For the longest time, I felt like I need to be the smartest person in the room. I need to be the one, because that's the way the model was built, and my organization grew for many years on what we know today as a command and control model. Well, I think we had a good culture. Everybody was coming in my door, and that ultimately leads to a breaking point to where you can't grow any further and you're stymied because there just aren't enough hours in the day.
What was the pain that you were feeling? Give me an example of how that command and control model begins to break down.
Yeah, the pain is just one of not being able to grow it any further because you've got too many people that are reporting to you and too much delegation that is happening. And there's only so much that you can do, and the ceiling's pretty low. And if not for being able to change the way you lead, which is a major evolution, the major pain was for my family lost a lot of opportunity with Dad. I'm not making the soccer games. I'm not making the swim practices because I'm doing one of the aspects of trying to grow the business on the weekend. Sales, bookwork, managing, all those things that you don't see on the front lines that have to happen.
So tell me some of the steps you took to evolve away from that command and control model and evolve towards something that was ultimately healthier for you and the business.
Probably the biggest inflection point to move beyond, but it took me another 10 years to get there, beyond a command and control model to one that is very flat on top, was running up against the ceiling on one aspect of what we did in grounds care was lawn care. So it's fertility programming 4 or 5 times a year. We had about 35 employees on that side. And by the mid-90s, we're doing sport field projects outside of our region, really opportunities across the country, one-offs. But then I've got all this team growth on the lawn care side, and I just couldn't begin to manage it all. And so my out was, I honestly feel like I did literally sell, but I feel like I sold out in retrospect, was I could not figure out how to grow each aspect of the business in this kind of command and control model. I couldn't deal with any more people. So I looked for where most of the people were employed, and it was the lawn care piece. And I ended up selling that to Scott. I was in my mid-40s. On the street, business colleagues were like, wow, man, you killed it. That's awesome. What are you going to do the rest of your life? I was just looking for a way out of all this growth and how to then be able to manage a much smaller team, which was the sports side of it at that point.
Was it hard in any way to give up even just a piece of the business? Like emotionally hard?
So selling the lawn care was a real dichotomy between, being shouted out, being applauded, and then internally, yes, it was gut-wrenching because I had a relationship with the team members. To make matters even worse, I owned the building that it was run out of, and that's where I reported to, too, every day on the sports side. Scott's continued to work out of that facility for 2 more years. So I had to cross paths with the former employees, and that was really difficult, hard to even talk about to this day, to where my team members were like, Joe, you sold us out. You were the last person I ever thought would do such a thing. So it was really tough decision to realize that just because of my inadequacies in leadership is why I chose at the time to do so. I often think about would I do that, again. And the answer is honestly, as harsh as it may sound, yes, because I did not have the correct organization built up to that point. And I couldn't manage an organization that could continue to scale because of the command and control aspect of our model. I was command and control. The people that I had in assisting in leadership were command and control. So it was just this model of all these little mountains of watch the way I do it and do the same. And that doesn't lead to an organization that can truly scale beyond the small business size.
So what are the specific ways that the management style at the Motz Group is different now?
We're drastically different than we were in the command and control days. So that was 1999 when I sold the lawn care. And it took 10 years to develop another model because it required reinventing myself. We've had a functional evolution in the things we've done, but more importantly, it required a cultural evolution. It took me 10 years to reach that place, a lot of coaching, a lot of outside support, third-party expertise, and not the things we did, but how to lead a business of a different model. It wasn't until 2009 that I really put my neck out and said, we had just come off of our best year, our best growth, and then we're coming into the recession that we had in 10, 11, 12. I felt, wow, here's another crisis where we really got to tighten everything up. But I also felt like this is an opportunity to, I can't let this crisis go to waste because there's an awful lot of people on the street that really don't have the skill, don't have turf knowledge, but they've got tremendous business knowledge. So I started voicing, I'm going to, for the first time ever, going to truly hire up and go after people that have skills in business that I don't have. Truly have business development skill, marketing skill, skills in how to be innovative, how to run a much more efficient financial team. I'm not a finance guy at all. I'm a generalist. I'm not skilled in any one of those areas. But what that took was just opening up and saying, you don't have to be the smartest in the room. And it's so easy to say that and have that intent, but to actually do it is transformational.
Yeah. I want to shift to the present day for a moment. We're now living in this world where remote work is becoming the norm. Younger employees want different things out of their work environment, their work culture. How have you had to change your approach to management over the last couple of years because of these trends?
Yeah, the remote environment has really allowed us to capitalize on the communication platforms that we've developed. We took them for granted, but when we're all together, because even though we're together, we're 100 and some people, so we have a lot of remote people. Our remotes prior to 2019, we cut our teeth for some years figuring out how to help them not feel like they're on an island, because for a while they did. And so we started working with more platforms of communication where we're better hearing from them. We're still learning from that. I feel like we can do our best job for each other in building careers when we are face to face, but people also have lives outside of work. So the ability to work from wherever it makes the most sense for your self-enrichment, for your family, is not any longer like an issue whether they showed up or not.
Being able to work where you want to work is a big one right now. Another thing is professional development and things like clearly defined advancement opportunities. That's become a greater priority for workers these days. What do you do at your company to keep people growing in their roles? And has that been more difficult in the remote work era?
Being forced remote for the 2+ years period of time that we were has been difficult. And it's my biggest worry is people being able to advance their career. We've done a better job, though, of understanding when we've got the need for collaboration. And so that we did over Zoom and learned how to get better at. But now that we're coming back together on those collaborative formats, we're separating the meetings when it's more of reporting. Those are highly effective and sometimes more effective remote than in person. But where we really need to have input and collaboration and ideation, those we're striving to come together for. Growth is a very necessary element of business. If an individual isn't growing, it's really hard to come in with that can-do attitude every day. And then organizationally, if you're not growing, the only alternative is you're declining. It's really hard to stay on a plateau and have everybody get excited about that. We focus an awful lot on individual growth. What are a person's goals? The way we understand that as we continue to grow in size is through our monthly one-to-ones, where the individual can sit down and visit with their manager more on as a person and what their goals are for the year and how they're doing on that, and then also the functional aspects of what they're doing. We do collectively have a leadership development program that everybody, 100% of the people are engaged in what we do call engage on an annual basis, to where we have a 4-day session that happens over a 4-month period of time that really helps explain where we've been, what we've learned from our history, where we are today, help those relatively new employees understand what our vision is for the future. And then we've got a more in-depth 12-month program, which is called Elevate, for people that want to step beyond their comfort zone and really develop leadership capability beyond what they're presently comfortable with. And there's a strong encouragement and desire to grow organically rather than hire from outside. So those programs afford us a tremendous amount of opportunity and being able to continue to have the same culture and chemistry that we have ongoing to be able to tackle our growth going into the future.
In your experience, what's the most effective way to keep employees motivated?
Most effective way to keep employees motivated is understand what they're passionate about and feed that.
If you could go back to day one of your business, way back in 1977, what's one piece of advice you would give yourself that could have saved you a lot of time, money, or effort?
Understand the person's goals and what they're after and whether they are a team player or a me player. I often hired people who were individually, they excelled at something, but they might not have been the best team player. And it's better to have people who collectively excel rather than individually excel at the expense of others.
I probably should have asked this earlier. Would you rather be tackled on artificial turf or natural grass?
I would honestly rather be tackled on natural turf. It's really hard to replace Mother Nature. Yeah.
All right, last question. Let's say you're at a party and you want to impress people with a piece of trivia about the turf business or sports fields in general. What nugget do you pull out?
Yeah, most of the natural turf fields they're looking at, high-performance fields when they're watching on TV, aren't straight natural. They're actually grown down through synthetic. The players, the coaches, everybody thinks it's natural, but it's able to be kept abnormally perfect because it's grown through this foundation that locks it in place.
What does that mean? It's grown through a foundation. It's natural turf that's grown through a synthetic foundation?
You've got natural turf on top, and then we've got the synthetic fibers underneath that the root system goes down and intertwines through that holds it in place so it doesn't pop out like a toupee when a player runs out for the ball or slide tackles for the corner kick.
Wow. And the players are not aware of it. It's just as good as the real thing.
Yeah, it's got to play and perform in every way, just like natural turf. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's all I have. Thanks for being on the show, Joe.
Thank you.
So that was my conversation with Joe Motz. Thanks to him for being here. Again, I'm Ben Goldstein. I'm the VP of Marketing at Nutshell. Nutshell is a simple and affordable CRM that helps thousands of B2B organizations around the world close more deals. We know that if you're a small business owner, there's a point where Google Docs and spreadsheets just don't cut it anymore, and that's where we come in. We help B2B organizations of all kinds get off spreadsheets, get organized, and start tracking their contacts and leads. Every Nutshell subscription comes with unlimited contact and data storage and access to our friendly Michigan-based support team, all starting at just $16 a month. Visit nutshell.com to start a 14-day free trial and use the coupon code POD20 when you purchase to get 20% off your first year's subscription. That's all for now. Special thanks to our executive producer, Seth Ressler at Community Marketing Revolution. Thanks to my co-producer, Ashante Clemens. And thank you for listening. Until next time.